There are some watches that are quite simply absolute legends, and it is watch lore that you must try them before you go to meet the great watchmaker in the sky. But today I don't want to talk to you about the obvious choices. These are the legends that you perhaps don't know about, that have slipped through the pages of history a bit. You don't have to buy them, but you absolutely must, without a doubt, try them on. Seiko is the long-standing legend of value-for-money watchmaking. Whilst the Special Forces mad lads were decked out in Rolex, the average Johnny B cannon fodder had to make do with something cheaper, Seiko. But unlike everything else these poor souls were kitted out with, the Seiko actually worked, and worked well. It didn't try to burn, strangle, poison, or generally destroy its owner, and as such was well loved. Even the US Navy issued them, so I guess they made up with Japan in the end. Ever improving on its rock-solid foundation, Seiko upped its game in 1975 with a watch that would affectionately become known as the Tuner. Not because of its power and speed in the water, but because of its resemblance to the canned storage, often used for the fishy flesh. Perhaps inspired by Gillette's pursuit of the infinitely bladed razor, Seiko, having avoided the use of crown guards on its previous watches, chose the malicious compliance route to industry standards and created a single crown guard that wrapped itself around the entire case. But it was more than just an uncut dive watch. It was a budget-be-damned concoction to rival the other challengers of the deep, the Rolex Sea Dweller and Omega PloProf, which were both being developed to combat pressures at over 500 meters below the waves. The biggest issue was helium ingress, which, during decompression, was causing crystals to pop out like a Super Bowl halftime show tit. Where Rolex's solution was to beef everything up and fit a valve to let the gas escape safely, Seiko took a more technical approach, building a titanium monoblock case to keep the gas out in the first place, and the tuna can shroud in ceramic to keep the case in, which, now I think about it, kinda looks like a clerical collar. The only buoys this one will be touching, however, are orange and bouncy. Today's version is even more impressive, upping water resistance from 600 meters to a cool kilometer. Although I wouldn't expect anything less from the 50mm case. It's so big I'm actually starting to wonder if tuna cans were named after it. Nevertheless, the lugless design wears much better than you'd expect, although the price is just as startling as it was back then at £2,280. Not to worry though, because they make a 200-meter version with the same studded choker for about £500. Speaking of passing wind, here's another flatulent fact about the helium escape valve for you. Whilst Rolex originally developed and patented it, it was actually first made available for sale by Doxa. Rolex had only intended for its helium escape valve equipped watches to be used by extreme divers, and so, in a greater display of irony than when Iron Man drove his Hyundai Ioniq through Iron City, Tennessee, Rolex were beaten to the punch like it had beaten Blancpain back in the 50s. Only this time, it didn't really work out so well for Doxa, which means glory in Greek. Looks like Iron Man stopped off for some iron brew along the way. Before it all went props up for Doxa in the 80s, it actually found fame with its sub-series of dive watches, which went on to be worn in anger by the original live-action Little Mermaid, Jacques Cousteau. The sub-name is not actually a complete rip-off of the Rolex Submariner, but instead referring to how Doxa substituted any original naming ideas for a complete rip-off of the Rolex Submariner. Whilst the Rolex was effectively a templated watch built on a modified turnograph base, the Doxa Sub was designed from the ground up as a dive watch with the help of Cousteau, who'd also helped develop the Aqualung, which had made all of this diving malarkey possible in the first place. Developments like the cushion case with built-in crown guards, the spring-loaded self-adjusting clasp, and the high-vis emergency orange dial all aim to make the Doxa better down where it's wetter. The masterstroke, however, which still appears to remain unique to the Sub, is a dual-purpose timing bezel, which not only features a standard 60-minute counter, but also a decompression calculator, which is great for, not dying. After suffering through the quartz crisis, Doxa was revived in the 2000s and is now really the go-to dive watch choice for anyone with about £1,500 and a grudge against Rolex. Whether you choose the original 300 or the slightly more wearable 200, you too can channel your inner Jacques Cousteau in discovering the mysteries of the basically identical Professional versus Sea Rambler versus Shark Hunter editions. First, there was Seamaster. Then there was Speedmaster. two of humanity's greatest opponents defeated through exploration to the bottom of the ocean and the breaking of the sound barrier. There was only one more arena to conquer, the domain of deepest darkest fear, the 746 to King's Cross. It might seem like a bit of an odd trio, but to Omega, the Seamaster, Speedmaster and Railmaster went together as well as Alvin, Simon and Theodore. By 1957, the rollout of electrified railway networks was becoming commonplace across Europe, and mechanical watches and large electric fields get along like Travis Scott and his bodyguard. When exposed to a strong electric field, the metal parts inside a watch can become magnetized. For the delicate hairspring especially, that's a problem, sticking together so it effectively becomes shorter and beats way too fast. So the Railmaster really was Omega's answer to the Milgauss of the year before, aimed not just at the masters of the rail, but scientists and engineers as well. I don't think you'll be surprised to know it was kind of a flop. Unlike the Seamaster and the Speedmaster, which seemed well defined in their purpose, the Railmaster was a bit more notepad, sweaty waterproof jacket and getting beaten up for your lunch money. Even Omega to this day doesn't really know what to do with it, slipping it into the Seamaster collection because, as we're all aware, trains function really well in the wet. I don't know about the rest of Europe, but the UK train network would have ground to a halt if the Railmaster were only added to the leaves on the Linemaster collection. Nevertheless, the Railmaster remains not only one of the holy trinity of ass-kicking watches, but also one of the most affordable Omega makes. There's the Railmaster Heritage Edition at just over £7,000, but there's also the entry-level Railmaster at £4,350. It's anti-magnetic, gets an in-house Omega movement with the coaxial escapement, and goes pre-owned for almost half the price. Panerai gets a lot of stick for sucking harder than a black hole with bills to pay, and it's true, there is much in the Panerai lineup I wouldn't wear if they were dipped in the cure, but if it's possible to look past the Axis application of Panerai watches, then I'm sure a few stinkers are hardly the straw that should break the camel's back. I continue to be a big fan of the basic shapes of the Radomir and Luminor. I say the basic shapes because I want to deviate into the subjective for a moment, for a take so hot it's got McDonald's lawyers acting sus. Panerai is not a luxury watch brand. They are basic, functional, albeit well made, watches, and any attempt to try otherwise just gets weird. Like marrying your cousin weird. So no thank you carbon fibre, no thank you tourbillon equation of time. Yes please bare bones basic bitch Radomir and Luminor. Why does it work? Because it's the byproduct of a trait any Briton can relate to, making do. The original Panerai watches, especially the Radomir, are parts bin specials built to a budget because there was no alternative option. Questionable political alignment aside, that makes it charming and interesting, and that's why it can't be a luxury item. It would be Trigger's Broom by Balenciaga. If you're not familiar with the story, here's a quick recap. Panerai modified and sold naval equipment for use underwater, capitalizing on the very earliest attempts at underwater warfare. And its secret sauce was Radomir, not the watch, the glow-in-the-dark paint powered by, that's right, deadly radium. But back when radium was cool, before Marie Curie ruined everyone's fun by pointing out that it was causing many hideous deaths, its health and safety gone mad. Panerai was making a killing flogging glowing torches, compasses, you name it, to the Italian Navy. Up until the point the Navy asked for a Radomir wristwatch, that is. For that, Panerai enlisted the help of a little-known watchmaker dabbling in the field of water resistance, Rolex. This was in the 1930s and Rolex wasn't as well known back then, so they took the gig, using a cushion-cased pocket watch, which was the style at the time. Now, to fit it to the wrist required a strap, and in those days watches didn't have straps. Weld on 4-wire strips to hold the strap, they said. Roberto's your Zio, it's the Panerai Radiomir. And bless my soul, but at the bottom of the pricing pile is the entry-level Radomir at a not too insulting £4,300. Used of course, you can get them for even less. Say some gangster is dissing your fly girl and you're all out of rounds, it's only later on when you're walking home by yourself that you think of a good comeback. That's too late. Watches are a lot like good comebacks. If every other brand touched by the divine pencil of Gerald Genter has released a re-edition, it's just no good to wait until several years later to have your say. The latest Ingenieur from IWC is the "I know you are, but what am I?" of day-late, dollar-short comebacks. But don't let that put you off, because it's actually one of the more attractive Genta designs available today. It seems with COVID came a very specific symptom, a strong bout of amnesia for the sheer disgust people previously felt for many of these 70s integrated designs. They say money can't buy happiness, but it looks like the investment potential of the Royal Oak and the Nautilus made a lot of people once unhappy with the design of these two watches very happy indeed. But it's always been in ingenieur form that it's escaped criticism most likely, just the mysterious bezel holes calling Genta's form over function design language into question. Unfortunately for IWC, they priced it like they're pitching it on Shark Tank. The present day permutation isn't the only one, however, although it is one of the better looking. Rummage through the back catalogue and in between re-editions of the round original, there's some great affordable options. But for some reason, IWC always seems to be on the back foot with the Ingenieur. They drew inspiration from the Genta SL when interest in the 70s aesthetic was at an all-time low. When hype started to build, the angular arrangement was axed and the round vintage version returned. Now the integrated intensity is dying down, we get an angular 10 grand IWC alternative. IWC may seem to be doing everything in their power to make you hate the Ingenieur, but it's actually great company for the other Genta entries. Now IWC has done the hard work in making it, you just need to let depreciation take care of the rest. If you thought the Seiko Tuner was an overkill way to make an extreme dive watch, wait until you get a load of this. Rodney, you plunger, it's the Omega Seamaster PloProf. As per the Seiko, it was built from the ground up to be the ultimate dive watch, and went overboard in more ways than one. Like the Tuner, it was built with a monoblock case. But what does that mean exactly? Well, it does what it says on the Tuner tin. The case is made from a single piece of metal. What looked like a caseback on the PloProf was in fact just milled into the single piece of steel for the watch to grip onto the wrist with. Otherwise, the movement, dial, hands, crystal, everything was loaded in through the front like a washing machine, with the crystal forming a compression seal that got more secure under the increasing pressure of deeper seas. That's big brain thinking, because there's no need to make something that lets the helium back out again if it can't get in the first place. But Omega weren't done yet. No one was going to take their serious dive watch seriously unless it was uglier than a frog in a blender. So on one side came an all-new crown system, and on the other an all-new bezel system. The crown looks pretty standard, but just like a really definitely for real soccer injury, appearances can be deceiving. The part that looks like a crown merely winds the actual crown into its flush resting place. The real crown is the square nub at the end, which, when locked down, is held by the case and can't accidentally be turned. The bezel's even more deceiving. Give a turn one way and it won't move. That's normal for dive watches to prevent time being added by mistake. Give it a turn the other way, however, and it still won't move. That's because the button top right has to be pressed to release it. Now it's impossible to undercook your eggs. Gently does it because if you're more of a fan of his later stuff once he'd mellowed out a bit, then you can do much worse than the Bulgari Octo. Think of it like his pension pot, a retirement fund he unlocked by selling the Octo collection to Bulgari. Now you might be wondering what on earth a Greek jewellery brand is doing with a Twilight Genta design and how many different ways it broke it, but in truth the result is rather surprising. Rather than milk that cow drier than a dehydrated Chardonnay, Bulgari set to work proving all the naysayers wrong by turning the Octo collection into a mainstay of horological headlines. That was after they learnt their lesson by milking the Daniel Roth brand drier than a dehydrated Chardonnay. The looks of the Octo collection aren't going to be for everyone. With more angles than a maths exam and more steps than Machu Picchu, it was always going to be an acquired taste. But the point is that it's original, aka not boring as shit. In terms of the basic premise of telling the time, it's the polar opposite of something like the Tudor Black Bay 58. One's a hint of vanilla, whilst the other's blue bubblegum with sparklers and a Tyrannosaurus Rex. The collection has peaked with its pursuit of thinness, gathering up records like a last-minute DJ for its various complications and even the outright title for thinnest mechanical watch ever. If jumping in with both feet on the 12,900 Octo Finissimo is a bit too bold, you can dip your toe with Bulgari's Octolite, the Roma at 6,800 pounds. Or you can pick one up used for less than 3,000. Whatever happens next, I implore you not to close this window, shut your device down and nuke it from space. Bear with me, because I'm about to suggest that you should try a Hublot. Did I fall headfirst from a second-story window? Have all those asbestos sandwiches finally got to me? Did I lose a bet with Nico Leonard? No, I genuinely think the Big Bang is worth a look. Let's get some stuff out of the way first. The value for money you get with Hublot is suboptimal. You'd lose less money betting on the horse after it's been shot. If Mark Rober ever gets wind of the Big Bang original listing at £11,600, they're in trouble. Even a Nigerian prince knows where to draw the line. Used though, especially if you're willing to buy one from Japan, they have a whole bunch there for some reason, no jokes about the Big Bang please, you can pick one up for less than £5,000. That still sounds like a lot, but hear me out on this, because that original design is just about to turn 20 years old, and that's starting to make it pretty dang cool. I appreciate me saying that has completely the opposite effect, but keep rolling with me and you'll see what I mean. It's an integrated style design from before all the recent hype. Got an integrated rubber strap before that was cool, and even, and this feels almost like blasphemy coming out of my mouth, had a reserved stealth wealth vibe about it before people started worrying about getting their heads dented. You name me a better watch that says you know about watches without being try-hard than the original Big Bang. It's like the anti-watch. It's not the newest, hottest thing, so hypebeasts won't be wearing it. In fact, I think the most likely place to find one will be over the sleeve of an Italian old boy sat outside the bar on a balmy summer's evening. If you want a masterclass in not giving a shit, take a look over at what Swatch is doing with Breguet. If you didn't know, Breguet may well be the most important watchmaker in all of watchmaking. And the way it's been treated over the last few decades is like sending a little old Spanish lady to touch up the Sistine Chapel. One of Breguet's lesser-known watches, which is a bit like saying one of the lesser-known Apollo 16 astronauts, is the Type 20, one that stands out from the usually lavish affair of the manufacturer's collection for being much more ordinary. It's a pilot's chronograph, built to spec for the French Air Force after they got jelly of Germany's. I'm saying the French Air Force because that makes sense and you'll understand what I mean. Breguet actually lists it as the French Naval Air Army, which sounds to me like describing an article of clothing as a shoe-glove hat. But whatever, I'm sure it's really great and they try really hard. The recent re-release of the Type 20 was disappointing in a number of ways. Firstly, whichever variant you go for, and there are two, feel a bit too big at 42mm. I know I've been urging your consideration towards a 45mm Panerai and a 44mm Hublot, but not all millimeters are born equal. The Panerai wears smaller than you'd think, and so does the Hublot. The Breguet Type 20 is more like having a small bird's nest on your wrist. Then there's the date window, the position of which seems to have been chosen with a roulette wheel, and the size set to accessibility mode. Oh, and the cherry on the cake is the bracelet, which adds £3,000 to an already substantial £17,900. But I've got some good news, because there's an older, and some might say better version, that you can pick up in its entirety for about the price of just that bracelet. It's another Japanese special, if you've had your Brave injections, otherwise it still makes for a substantially impressive purchase at around the same price as a Black Bay Chrono. If I hadn't already sent my reputation off into a flat spin with the Hublot, then I'm bound to with this. The last legendary watch I think you should find some way to try, if even for a moment, is a Richard Mille. But not just any old Technicolor RM, but one of the earliest ones, the RM5. Do I think it's an £80,000 watch? I'm struggling to think it's an £8,000 watch to be honest, but that doesn't mean I don't like it. The earlier, subtler RMs have a habit of shrink wrapping around the wrist in the most comfortable memory foam-like way. Modern Richard Mille's Build-A-Bear approach to design has given it a reputation for eye-melting concoctions, combined with a size that makes them a menace to overhead airline pilots. But actually the RM5 is staggeringly different. It's only 37.8mm across, with the lugless design measuring, top to bottom, 45mm, and it's thinner than a Submariner at 11mm, so overall it wears supremely well, and way better than many normal watches. But what I think cements its reputation as legendary is just the sheer difference in its approach. The design is immediately recognisable and gimmick-free. The same can't be said of every Richard Mille, but in the case of the RM5, it's actually its simplicity that makes it work. Technically, it's impressive too. I'm not talking about the adjustable rotor weight with variable inertia, that's the CrossFit of watchmaking, but the PVD-treated titanium baseplate inside. I don't know what the first use of titanium in a movement was, but considering titanium wasn't used in watchmaking at all until the 1970s, it could well have been one of the first. Given that Omega's Aquaterra Ultralight with its titanium movement fetches £50,000 today, I'm guessing they've still not quite got it figured out yet. But overall, I just like how Richard Mille was the linchpin for the modernisation of watchmaking, in what had become a very tired and boring industry. It's like sitting down and watching The Matrix for the first time after a decade of Hugh Grant. And now The Matrix and Richard Mille are getting on for a quarter century old. I think it's time to really start appreciating them. And remember, prevent disruptive patrons from ruining your movie theatre experience by watching it on your phone with noise-cancelling earbuds. See you next time.